Tell us about your plan on the confiscation of guns, which obviously many believe is unconstitutional. Also very concerned that it plays right in the hands of Republican candidates.
To be clear, I'm not talking about confiscating anybody's guns.
I'm convinced Beto lives in an alternative reality, or he just thinks we're all stupid. How do you say this?
Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15, your AK-47.
And this.
If someone does not turn in an AR-15 or an AK-47, one of these weapons of war, or brings it out in public and brandishes it in an attempt to intimidate, as we saw when we were at Kent State recently, then that weapon will be taken from them.
And then backdoor and say you're not trying to take anyone's guns. This guy is a lunatic.
But I do think that for those weapons of war, AR-15s, AK-47s, these were designed and sold to the militaries of the world to kill people on a battlefield, and there are more than 16 million of them in America. And we've seen the devastating effect that they can have in Dayton, Ohio, or El Paso, Texas, or Odessa, not too far from where I live. Those must be bought back, or else each of them are an instrument potentially of terror in this country. And
Beto talks about the AR-15 like it was this secret squirrel military weapon that leaked to the American public, and we've been buying them on the black market ever since. If there are 16 million AR-15s in America, they clearly were designed to be used by civilians. Hell, they've been marketing them to the public since the 60s. What are you talking about?
And it is literally terrorizing and terrifying people throughout America. More than 80% of Hispanics in Texas fear that they will be a victim of a mass shooting attack like the one that we saw in El Paso, Texas.
Hey, you, come here. Yeah, you, come here. I want to tell you something. Want to know what terrorizes people way more than AR-15s? Hammers. Yes, you heard me right. I said hammers. More people die from being hammered to death than they do from AR-15s. And not just by a little bit either. It's almost double.
But Joe, that's just part of a larger plan to reduce gun violence with universal background checks, red flag laws to stop someone who has a firearm that may harm themselves or someone else, and then ending the sale of these weapons of war to our fellow Americans. I think combined doing all of that, we will significantly reduce gun violence in America and save thousands of lives every year.
No, you won't. Not even a little bit. Let's say you ban and confiscate the AR-15s. Over 80% of gun violence in this country is committed with handguns, and less than 1% of gun violence is committed with AR-15s. So even if you got rid of all the AR-15 deaths, that's less than 1% of the population of people. And that's assuming the people doing the shooting with the AR-15s wouldn't just use a different type of gun. No one, and I mean no one, can name one case where universal background check would have prevented a shooting. Not just a mass shooting, but any shooting. The irony about the red flag laws is they've actually gotten people killed. These laws have nothing to do with saving lives. It's about disarming the population. I just don't understand why people don't see that at this point. You literally have this man saying it to you.
So, Congressman, so let me ask you, let's say I have an AR-15. I bought it legally 5 years ago. I'm a law-abiding citizen. You want to buy it back as President of the United States. I say no. You give me other incentives. I say no. I bought this legally. I'm keeping this. I live on a ranch. I need it for protection. What would you do then?
First of all, I wouldn't concede the point on following the law. I don't know you well, Joe, but I know you well enough to expect you to follow the law, even if it's a law that you disagree with. I think it's one of the things that distinguishes us as a country. We're a country of laws.
Okay, but let's just assume that there's a rancher in Texas that doesn't, that says, I'm not going to do this because this is an unjust law and it's unconstitutional. What's the next step? I think that's what we need to concede, because there will be people that don't turn their guns back in. What's the next step for the federal government there?
Yeah, I think just as in any law that is not followed or flagrantly abused, there have to be consequences, or else there is no respect for the law. So, in that case, I think there would be a visit by law enforcement to recover that firearm and to make sure that it is purchased, bought back, so that it cannot be potentially used against somebody else.
You got to be fucking kidding me. Beto is a fucking lunatic. That's literally a door-to-door confiscation. And in the beginning of the video, he said, no one is trying to take your guns. What the flying is wrong with this guy? You see, he thought he was clever by trying to play on Joe's moral virtue by saying, well, Joe, I just think that you being an upstanding citizen, that you would just obey this unconstitutional law. This is exactly what authoritarianism looks like. The notion that you follow every single unconstitutional law, no matter how evil it is, because you're such an upstanding citizen and it compels you to follow it. Beto, let me explain something to you. My constitutional rights trump your laws any day, always. And they always will. So you can pass all the laws you want. We're not complying. And for the record, you're right. We have no respect for unconstitutional laws. So we don't follow them.
But my faith is in this country and in my fellow Americans following the law and listening to people who own AK-47s and AR-15s, who acknowledge, who concede they don't need it for self-protection. They don't need it to hunt. Its real, true purpose and use is on a battlefield.
I don't care if 1 million people said that they don't need an AR-15. The Bill of Rights says I do. In the Second Amendment, when it said a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. You just said with your own mouth that the AR-15 is designed for the battlefield. Thus, if we have to preserve this free state against a tyrannical government, foreign or domestic, that means America will now become our battleground. And guess what that means? I'm gonna need that AR-15 you keep trying to take away from me.
And I think that's important to acknowledge, because when you talk to the people of Dayton who saw 9 gunned down in under 40 seconds, or in El Paso, 22 killed in under 3 minutes, it's hard to answer their question as to why this continues to happen, or why we would continue to allow more than 16 million of these weapons in our country.
Allow them in our country? They sell them in our country, and there are 16 million of them because people clearly see a need for them. I could see if there were only 297 AR-15s in the country, committing all of the 297 rifle deaths, but there are millions of them bought legally by people who see the need for them.
And Joe, we also have an example in Australia where those weapons of war were successfully bought back without going to a door-to-door confiscation, and where you've seen a dramatic reduction in gun violence and a dramatic reduction in mass shootings in that country.
Here we go again with this Australia did it and we should too mess. Australia has always had low crime, way before the ban of the guns, and with over 16 million guns in the US, people, please explain to me how our homicide rates have been falling since the 90s. We have more guns now than we did before, but yet our homicide rates continue to fall. Hell, we have the most guns in the world. By Beto's logic, the US should be leading the world in gun deaths, and yet we don't. We're not even close. Please stop with this Australia comparison nonsense, because it's fraudulent. For the record, in Australia, it wasn't a buyback, it was a mandatory buyback, i.e. confiscation. They don't have a Second Amendment in Australia. You're more than welcome to run for office in Australia, but keep that government oppression shit out of our country. Thank you, but no thank you, Francis. Right now, there's a culture war against the Second Amendment, which is why I need your help spreading our message to counter their message. You can do this by leaving a comment, sharing this video, and click the bell and subscribe button. Let my voice be your voice, and let them know you want to keep America tactical. Because the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed wasn't a suggestion, it was a directive. Also, if you're wondering where to get your I will not comply, I lost all of my guns in a boating accident, the AR-15 is protected by the Second Amendment, and your state-specific Keep America tactical shirts, click the links in the description section of this video.